My name is H.A. Goodman, and I'm an author, columnist, and journalist. Today is the official day of the move. Schumer applauds Trump on moving U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. So this is the Democratic Party is an example of the Democratic Party, Senate Minority Leader, applauding President Trump. Okay. In a rare moment of agreement with President Trump, Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer on Monday praised the president for moving the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This is the Hill. Now you might say, well, Chuck Schumer is Jewish just like H.A. Goodman, and that's why both of them approve of the move, which, which is an insult and which is considered to be a travesty to Palestinians and to people throughout the world. How dare President Trump do what actually Bernie Sanders voted to do? So Sanders vote is Jerusalem. So when you look at Bernie, this is interesting. Sanders' statement on President Trump recognizing. Let me see. I'm extremely concerned by reports that President Trump plans to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Israel. Then why did he vote for it? So Sanders' statement. So even Bernie Sanders voted on a resolution in Congress. So resolution Jerusalem. Sorry, I have to look this up, but it's tough to put everything on the screen in the. Bernie Sanders Democrats voted resolution supporting recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. This was already voted upon. Reaffirms the Jerusalem Embassy Act of 1995. Okay, Bernie Sanders already voted on this. So Democrats voted on a resolution supporting recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. So still the rebuttal is, well, that doesn't make it moral. Okay, wait a second. You have an establishment Democrat in Chuck Schumer, and you have Bernie Sanders, who obviously is, the Huffington Post called me the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet. So, key figures, okay, suddenly the shift of fine. This is an example. This was, okay, Bernie Sanders, along with 90 other senators, unanimously voted to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem in June. All right. So this is not a diabolical Trump plot, or, oh my God, here he goes again. Oh, only his foreign policy has only resulted in what? Peace between North and South Korea? Something Obama and no other president could have ever believed possible, or had. Obama never had any chance of peace between North and South Korea. We know from WikiLeaks emails that Hillary Clinton bragged to Goldman Sachs bankers about ringing China with missile defense. But before I get to, the protests and what's going on, you have Chuck Schumer, you have Bernie Sanders. They're both, well, Bernie now is, has taken a different vantage point, but he voted for the resolution to move the embassy. 90 other congressmen. 90 other senators throughout the years. No, what am I saying? I'm like all over the place. 90 out of 100 senators voted. You'll have to forgive me. I have there's so many things going on. There's so many issues I want to cover. So number one, this is not some bizarre Trump foreign policy. Let's look at Obama. Promise Jerusalem capital. Watch Obama Clinton promise to recognize Jerusalem as Clinton's capital. As Israel's capital. So these are all the presidents
Jerusalem is still the capital of Israel and must remain an undivided city.
Who was that? That was Bill Clinton.
Accessible to all.
As soon as I take office, I will begin the process of moving the United States ambassador to the city of Israel.
Who was that? George W.
As chosen as its capital.
I continue to say that Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel, and I have said that before, and I will say it again. And Jerusalem will remain the capital of Israel, and it must remain undivided. We will move the American...
So you have President Obama twice saying Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Clinton saying the same thing. Bush saying the same thing. Trump saying and doing it. The difference between Obama, Clinton, and Bush is that they talk. Trump actually did move the embassy. Now you have the issue. So I took 6 minutes. I was kind of all over the place, but it's a very difficult subject to talk about because this is the policy of the United States government regarding an embassy. An embassy. It is the decision and the prerogative of the United States of America to do what it wishes, to do what it wants. Regarding, and it's the prerogative of any country to move an embassy anywhere it wants. If other people engage in violence under the guise of protests, or we'll get to that in a second, but running towards militarized borders is not the way to deal with a lack of peace or an occupation that is a brutal occupation. I'm not saying it isn't, but that's not the way to deal with it. I'll get to that in a moment. But it is entirely the decision of the U.S. to move an embassy anywhere it wants. It is not the ridiculous notion this is from people who are so into diplomatic tweets or this bizarre notion of diplomacy. Don't anger a certain side. You can't do that because if you anger them, you're not closer to peace without having the embassy in Jerusalem. You moved the embassy in Jerusalem, that actually probably moves everyone towards the negotiating table. It definitely moves the Palestinians towards the negotiating table because they realize that America is going to go ahead with its foreign policy, with peace or without peace, or with a lasting negotiated peace between the Palestinians and Israel. So that probably would force them. Well, I mean, one would think the foreign policy of Trump directly led to North and South Korea now in peace talks. Everyone was saying, "Oh my God, look what he's saying!" Writing on Twitter, "Look what he's saying! Oh my God, how can he do this? He's, insulting Kim Jong-un. This is it could be a nuclear catastrophe." Well, now they shook hands in the demilitarized zone, DMZ, and President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un shook hands, and it was a momentous occasion. It was a groundbreaking moment in world history. And you have something that took place under Trump, even though it's perhaps counterintuitive when compared to the foreign policy or the behavior of other presidents. Maybe that was needed. Maybe a Trump was needed, or President Trump was needed to push North Korea towards the negotiating table. This issue now with, so many people being killed and these clashes at the border, you can disagree with me and you could say, "Oh my God, you're 100% wrong, HA, and how dare you condone slaughter and condone Israel's behavior." I'm not condoning, snipers targeting journalists or anything like that, or children, God forbid, or anything. I'm saying very simply, Hamas, if you can't organize tens of thousands of people protesting and not just it's not peaceful. Setting fire to tires and also shooting back and mainly trying to rush and break through militarized borders is not going to bring about peace. That's not a very difficult concept to understand. Liberal pundits want to just pontificate like they do about everything. It could be a prom dress, it could be the Middle East peace crisis, it doesn't matter. Especially with Israel, there's like this maniacal, frothing at the mouth, laser beam focus without any talk about Hamas. Hamas, a month ago, tried to assassinate Abbas, of Fatah, the Fatah leader. Do you know why? Does anyone care why? Does anyone even question on the left why Hamas and Fatah hate each other? Is that even up for debate or discussion? Is it even a discussion why both Palestinian governments, one in the West Bank and one in Gaza, cannot make peace with one another? Yet the focus is only 100% on Israel, why it can't find a peaceful solution or, disengage entirely and just, I don't know what is it that people who hate Israel want? They just want Israel to cease to exist and say, okay, we're packing up, we're leaving. It's not going to happen. There has to be there has to be peace talks. And this is not, you don't have a peaceful protest with people just running towards, human waves running towards, or just, okay, so you have the photo op now of people throwing rocks. What are you going to achieve? You're not going to achieve anything. You are going to, again, get liberal pundits or media to look and say, look what Israel's doing. Nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change. And you say, well, there's a BDS movement. Okay, even Noam Chomsky is not even a part of that. Because his vantage point, and there's no bigger critic of Israel, but his vantage point is, well, if you want to go after, Chomsky says if you want to really boycott a country that's, overstepping international law, just boycott the U.S. That's his vantage point. Where even Chris Hedges basically said, well, I, respectfully disagree with Noam Chomsky. It's a maniacal focus that's partly, I'm not saying most, I'm saying a small part rooted in anti-Semitism. This belief that Israel is at the fault of every single thing that takes place in the Middle East, or every single thing that takes place with Hamas or with the Palestinians. There's a reason why people in the West Bank aren't just rushing and trying to overpower, Israeli security points or Israeli borders. There's a reason why Fatah and people in the West Bank aren't doing that, even though they're not, they're living. They want a state just like the people in Gaza. That the whole point is for them to eventually get along with each other so they can form one unified government, and then hopefully one day, sooner rather than later, both sides, Israel and a unified government between the West Bank and Gaza, will negotiate and discuss and talk. But you're talking about an issue where Jerusalem is the historic capital, the ancient capital of the Jewish people in Israel. You had Bill Clinton, you had Bush, you had President Obama, you have 90 out of 100 senators, even Bernie Sanders, and all saying that Jerusalem should be Israel's capital. You have Trump actually following through, and now, coincidentally, you have these massive human waves of Palestinians rushing militarized borders. It's not just a protest. It is a demonstration where Hamas and liberal media are basically saying, well, look, you know what? Oh, their lives are so horrible. Look what they're doing. They're essentially committing suicide. It's all Israel. It's 100% Israel. No, you have to stop that. If you are a governing body, if you are the leaders of Gaza, and you're in the government controlled by Hamas, you cannot go ahead and you cannot say that this will lead to peace. This is not going to lead to peace. Those people should be alive. Should not be. I am against not even one Palestinian injured or killed. But what is the end game? Is there an end game here? When Hamas launched rockets and then Israel retaliated overwhelmingly, or when this takes place and then Israel retaliates overwhelmingly, how does this benefit the people of Gaza? I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any push or any emphasis towards acknowledging, the needs of the Palestinian people or needs of people in Gaza. But the long term here is the same issue all over again. The lesser power, does something either overtly militant or violent, or now under the guise of peaceful protests with rocks being thrown and shooting also, and burning tires and rushing security fences and rushing border fences and human waves of just people rushing and getting or either rushing or getting too close to a militarized zone. Obviously, if you do that, you're going to be shot at. I'm not saying that there are people who exist only to pontificate and condemn Israel. They don't care, and that's what's really sad and frightening. If you're a Palestinian and you're watching this segment, understand something. I'm actually focused on the lives of Palestinian people, meaning that I don't want a Palestinian person to die for no reason. The Israeli government is not going to budge not 1 inch from this protest or / just human waves against rushing towards a militarized border. Not 1 inch. There's nothing to be gained. So these lives and these people should be alive, and they should be they shouldn't be injured. But the rebuttal now, the rebuttal, of course, is, well, you're condoning Israel's behavior, and how dare you, and you're cold-hearted, and Israel's 100% at fault. Well, what do you want them to do? They're pretty famous or well-known or respected journalists out there. What's the end game? What is the end game here? Do you want Israel to just say, okay, just have Jerusalem, go ahead and have Tel Aviv? We're just not even going to... Oh, the settlements with religious Jews who believe that God gave them the land, just like you have, extreme religious nuts everywhere, that they're just going to leave. What do you want to happen at the end of the day from the constant, repeating cycle of violence? I have always from day one called, maybe I'm stuck in the 90s, okay? But I've always from day one called for a two-state solution. That's what I want. I actually want Hamas and Fatah to form one government, and then that government to negotiate with Israel and to have peace talks like they've had in years past, in decades past. But that's not taking place. It's this constant show of, rebellion, or this constant show from Hamas. I'm not saying that, Fatah also has major issues with Israel, but you don't see this. But you don't see this in the West Bank. Give me your thoughts below. The United States has a right to move its embassy to Jerusalem. Clinton, Bush, Obama, and now even Bernie Sanders have all at one point stated, yeah, let's move we're going to, or we approve of the move to Jerusalem. And now you have these, it's not a protest, they're essentially riots, and they're human waves of people just rushing militarized borders. And then the usual pontification. Oh my God, look what Israel's doing. Look what Israel's doing. Zero mention of Hamas. And at the end of the day, what are you going to achieve? Liberal journalists think they're going to shame Israel into just suddenly giving up Jerusalem. Or shame religious, people who are just, settlers. I too believe that there shouldn't be settlements in lands that are Palestinian lands. But that's also, you have to talk about, this is all part of a peaceful negotiation. This does not lead to peaceful negotiation. This leads to the Likud or Netanyahu or entrenched factions within Israel saying, we can't even negotiate with Hamas. Look what's happening now. And it obviously caused greater hatred when obviously there's bloodshed on the Palestinian side, or at least in Gaza. But at the end of the day, if you're watching this and you are okay, you can hate Israel. Let's say you hate Israel and you disagree with Israel, or you hate Israel, you think they're the root of all evil in the Middle East crisis there. But if you're okay with Palestinians just rushing towards bullets to prove that their side is morally superior, or I should say Hamas sending these people towards an extremely, extremely dangerous area where they know there's going to be death and they know there's going to be bullets firing in their direction. There's also a moral element of like a human shield, Hamas using human shields or human waves of people, basically in, committing murder. If you're going ahead and you're sending people to their deaths for a media victory, you are also not only complicit, you are also committing murder. If you believe that Israel's murdering people, and you don't think Hamas is murdering people by sending those people towards militarized zones, then you really don't have the right to pontificate, but of course you will. Give me your thoughts below. This is... there should be an emphasis on peace. There should be an emphasis on a Palestinian state. Instead, there's just an emphasis on hating Israel. The emphasis is not on a long-term solution. The emphasis always, the focus always, from liberal pundits, always, is how can we manage to pontificate and lecture and stand on this moral high horse and just go ahead and condemn. Let's pick one side we feel is the greater, is David, or no, it's Goliath. Let's side with David and let's just condemn. Meanwhile, you're okay with Hamas's actions, or you don't even bring them up, which says something about you. Give me your thoughts below. Share this segment everywhere. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you are willing to look at a very horrific situation from the vantage point of trying to find a long-term peaceful solution. I want peace between the Palestinians and Israelis. I want the Palestinians to have their own state. But this is not going to be achieved with the current paradigm of thought. On both sides, but also especially as the lesser power, you have an obligation to, number one, make sure that you have a unified opposition. You can't go ahead and try to assassinate Fatah's leader and then suddenly just go ahead and embark on these quote-unquote protests. So obviously the West Bank and Gaza need to form a unified coalition. Then there should be peace talks with Israel. Then there should be some kind of negotiated long-term solution and peace. How often do you hear peace, the word peace, from liberal pundits? You don't. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. Share this segment everywhere. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thank you so much for listening.